All right, good day, people. So, one of the things I've been thinking about lately is growth and how it happens, I guess the processes or techniques by which one can try to promote growth and and just what growth is and what one means by growth. I think sometimes you just think about physical growth. It's almost as if when you're young, you can mark the little line on the wall behind you as you're growing, and you can see yourself grow up. And then, if you eat too much and you continue to do so, you can see yourself kind of grow out. And there always is this physical sense of growth that we recognize, but there seems to be very different senses of growth. There could be growths in the, I guess, inwardness, in capacities, in talents that lie dormant until displayed. It's not like a capacity or is somehow non-existent. It's it resides as a capability that can be drawn upon, and I think there are emotional resources of how one relates to oneself. There are inner resources for how one navigates toward a future. So I think there's a lot of different ways to get at even what one means by growth. And part of it seems like it's been covered over maybe in the contemporary world, beginning with the overflow of talk about transmitting and receiving. I mean, people talk a lot about sending and receiving of information as if like that's what goes on. The cult of information as it occurred after the telegraph really promoted subliminally in some way, in people's mind, it kind of had um, this notion that information stuff was the issue rather than the growth in the handling capacities or the growth in the overall competence of the people who are sending quotes and receiving the information. Today, it's somewhat covered over by talk of connection and networking and whatnot, because it may well be that, and again, this is part of the questions or the issue I'm trying to think through, but it's as if there's a kind of growth that occurs not by anyone sending anything, not by anyone being, quotes, connected. The connection isn't what makes the growth occur. It's There are different ways to get it, but it has to do with resistances and obstacles and the set in structures that need to be there, and then in order to be overcome, one grows and transcends that obstacle or that resistance. Uh, you know, One way we could think about it as otherness, but let me back up. I'll try to cut it with weights. When someone's working out with weights, they have whatever, I don't know how many pounds you have in a dumbbell, 5 pounds or 10 pounds or 15. People do different ones and they're curling it. The weight in the dumbbell isn't literally transmitted, transferred, sent to the muscles in my body. No, my muscles, they have their own integrity, and by encountering and meeting, managing and handling and manipulating that weight in physical space, it makes them grow in response. That is, nothing is sent or received from the weights that brings about the growth in my arm, in my muscles. This is the same thing with reading. When I sit down with a text, there's nothing really sent or received. I mean, in the most obvious sense, when I look at a book, the book can only tell me what I'm able to attribute to it. That is, I bring my knowledge of the language, my interpretive background, my history, I bring that to the text, and yet the text is somehow able to teach me something because it's a mode of otherization. So in the same way that weights and resistances and obstacles are part of the physical form that promotes physical growth, maybe the issue would be to talk about otherness, and how does otherness promote a certain kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, a, a range of intellectual capacities that can grow. I don't know if I want to call them, maybe we call them philosophical. I'll have to cut back to that. But there's something like, you know, a growth of self or a growth of overall emotional capacity, a growth of how one thinks about the world and one's position in it, one's relationship to others. I mean, and again, part of it has to do with, I guess, this question of how other are the others who have otherized you. Now, again, it sounds so silly, but the others who you hang out with, they're other to varying degrees. When the child is very young, the others are very similar. And at that point, the child might not even be aware of the fact that they're using an interpretation, that the world they see is largely a cultural product that's been legitimated and confirmed by that little local community, and it makes it seem much more valid, much more unmistakable than perhaps it really is. And then as the child gets released from the family into the larger community, others get introduced. And as the child then gets, again, released and grows and develops, what occurs is, increasing degrees of otherization. The person encounters people who speak other languages, who came from far distances, have different cultures, different vegetarian, or as an example, could be a vegetarian, have very different dietary practices. And in these cases, the person, they don't receive the otherness from that other, but it gives them an opportunity to sort of draw away from themselves in order to come back to themselves. It's kind of like if you take a trip somewhere, right, and you come back, you kind of see your own dwelling with new eyes. To encounter another in their otherness is actually to be able to reappropriate yourself now in some new kind of way. And I think maybe I'll try to wrap this up with one of the issues I've been most interested in is the question of how important, how significant, or how crucial is this capacity to grow in, I guess it's using capacity twice there, but how does one learn to grow in one's range and depth of love? How do you do that? What would be the most profound way to experience love in all of its full ranges? And I want to be careful here. I don't mean it just in. See, I think that it gets heard so differently than I think what I'm meaning. I don't just mean love of friends and family and stuff like romantic love, something like that. That could be in there, but it means love of the stranger, love of the enemy, love of the earth itself, love of the mystery of one's own being and the fact of life. And maybe it goes back to philosophy, right? I mean, I think in some way philosophy is about love, right? I mean, philosophy is the love of wisdom. It's not just wisdom compiled, and it's certainly not justified true beliefs. Philosophy is love of wisdom, and it's a capacity that grows, that people can cultivate themselves in so many ways, and it has to do with how willing are they to transcend themselves in trials and encounters with resistances and forms of otherness. I think across it all, some kind of general overall caring capacity, a growth in the ability to love is is sort of what I'm interested in. All right, so thanks.